Imagine a flying reptile as tall as a giraffe at the shoulder, standing on an island where food was scarce and every kill mattered. That is Hatzegopteryx. Most people hear pterosaur and picture a fragile sky glider skimming a shoreline. But this animal was built like something heavier, rougher, and far more dangerous up close. Tonight, we're not chasing a myth about the biggest wings. We are rebuilding a real predator from bone texture, neck strength, island fossils, and the kind of skull that looks less like a bird and more like a siege weapon. Start with the head, because that is where Hatzegopteryx stops looking delicate. The skull was huge, broad, and unusually deep for an Azhdarchid. Instead of being built like a thin pair of tongs, it carried thick walls, strong internal bracing, and a shape better suited to resisting bending loads. That matters because a giant predator does not just peck. It grips, wrenches, and slams. The more we compare the skull to other giant pterosaurs, the more Hatzegopteryx looks like the heavy-headed bruiser of the family. The neck tells the same story. In many giant pterosaurs, the cervical vertebrae are long and lightweight, optimized for reach with as little mass as possible. Hatzegopteryx is different. Its neck vertebrae were shorter, broader, and reinforced. That gives us a simple biomechanical signal. This animal could handle bigger, messier forces close to the body. A neck like that is not ideal for dainty feeding. It is ideal for controlling struggling prey, bracing during a violent strike, and holding the head stable when the body is doing the real work on the ground. Now place that anatomy on Hațeg Island, the strange late Cretaceous ecosystem in what is now Romania. This was not a vast open continent full of giant herds. It was an island world shaped by limited space, fluctuating coastlines, and island dwarfism. Many dinosaurs here were smaller than their mainland relatives. That matters because a giant Azhdarchid in a small ecosystem needs a different strategy than a seabird gliding over endless coasts. Hatzegopteryx may have filled the top predator role simply because it was big enough, strong enough, and weird enough to do it. Picture the posture. Long hind limbs, strong forelimbs, a forward-pointing neck, a balanced ground-hunting frame. The best modern comparison is not a gull or an albatross. It is a stork, a marabou, or a secretary bird, scaled beyond anything alive and given a reptilian head. That does not mean Hatzegopteryx copied any one living bird. It means the body plan makes the most sense when the animal is moving, scanning, and striking on land. It could fly, yes, but that does not mean flight was the whole story. Ground control was. How would the attack work? Probably not as a long chase. More likely a fast closing step, a downward beak strike, and immediate control through height and leverage. A deep skull can survive impact better. A strong neck can drive the motion and absorb the aftermath. The beak itself may not need teeth when the rest of the animal can pin, lift, and slam. In a small island ecosystem, even medium prey would be worth enormous effort. Hatzegopteryx seems built to end that effort quickly, before the struggle turned expensive. This is where scale becomes unsettling. If the estimates are close, Hatzegopteryx had the height, reach, and mass to handle prey much larger than what we imagine for a normal pterosaur. Juvenile dinosaurs, isolated island herbivores, and other vertebrates suddenly enter the menu. Not because Hatzegopteryx was a monster from a film, but because the island offered few competitors of the same size. When your skull can hit hard, your neck can hold, and your body can tower over the target, the prey ceiling rises with you. That does not mean Hatzegopteryx stopped being a flyer. Giant Azhdarchids were still extraordinary aircraft, probably launching with all four limbs and then soaring to save energy. But flight may have been the transportation layer, not the feeding layer. It let the animal cross the island, check distant feeding grounds, and exploit carcasses or vulnerable prey wherever opportunity opened. The real point is not ground versus air. It is that Hatzegopteryx may have combined both, using flight to arrive and terrestrial power to finish the job. One easy mistake is to hear hollow bones and assume fragility. But pterosaur bone is an engineering material, not cheap tubing. Light outer walls, internal braces, and load paths let the skeleton resist forces surprisingly well for the weight. Hatzegopteryx takes that principle and pushes it in a direction that feels almost mammalian in toughness. Its skull and neck are not just giant by chance. They are the reinforced front end of an animal that likely experienced forces beyond what a fish-snatching shoreline flyer ever would. Lightweight does not mean delicate. It means optimized. Hatzeg itself deserves a pause because it explains why this predator feels so strange. Island ecosystems distort expectations. Herbivores shrink. Niche boundaries blur. Predators can become opportunistic generalists if they are big enough to dominate whatever turns up. Hatzegopteryx evolved in a place where normal continental rules were already bent. So when its anatomy looks unusual even among giant pterosaurs, that may be the island speaking through the bones. Isolation can build novelty fast when there is empty space in the food web and enough time for selection to lean hard. Another myth to kill. Hatzegopteryx is not simply Quetzalcoatlus copied onto a different map. Both were giant Ajdarchids, yes, but their proportions and likely feeding styles may not have matched as closely as pop culture assumes. Quetzalcoatlus is often reconstructed as lankier, more reach-focused, more open country. Hatzegopteryx looks deeper-skulled, thicker-necked, and better equipped for rougher interactions. Those differences matter because at giant size, small proportional changes can completely alter what an animal can safely attack, carry, or survive during impact. Step back and look at the silhouette. A tall stalking frame, a head large enough to unsettle anything below it, wings that turn the horizon into private property. Even before contact, that body changes the behavior of prey. A predator does not win only through speed or bite force. It also wins by being seen and understood. If young herbivores learned the shape of Hatzegopteryx against the sky, then every open patch of ground became a calculation. Feed here or move now. The island's top hunter may have ruled partly through pressure. Of course, the fossil record is incomplete. We do not get the luxury of a perfect skeleton laid out in museum order. We get pieces, skull fragments, humerus material, neck vertebrae, context, rock, comparison, physics. But when multiple lines point in the same direction, a pattern becomes hard to ignore. Massive head, reinforced neck, island ecosystem with reduced competition from other huge terrestrial predators, long legs and giant wings. On their own, each clue is interesting. Together, they point toward one of the most unusual aerial predators the Mesozoic ever produced. That is the final payoff. Hatzegopteryx may not have been a side character in the island ecosystem. It may have been the apex predator itself, a flyer that did not merely feed in the air, but used terrestrial power to own the ground. That possibility changes how we picture giant pterosaurs, not as giant storks alone, and not as dragon-like sky ornaments, but as true ecological heavyweights. When the bones are read together, Hatzegopteryx stops being just a big pterosaur. It becomes a solution to island predation on a scale nature almost never repeats. So here is the image to keep. A giant pterosaur on a shrinking island, not gliding past the action, but shaping it. Every feature we trust most, the skull, the neck, the stance, the setting, pulls toward the same conclusion. Hatzegopteryx was built for more than soaring. It was built to arrive, dominate, and leave smaller animals no room to forget it. If you could watch one day in the life of Hatzegopteryx, would you choose the launch, the landing, or the kill?